Welcome to 10 Minutes a Day, a daily reading of the Catholic Church's social encyclicals. Today we continue with Quadragesimo Anno, written by Pope Pius XI in 1931.
When we speak of the reform of institutions, the state comes chiefly to mind, not as if universal well-being were to be expected from its activity, but because things have come to such a pass through the evil of what we have termed individualism, that, following upon the overthrow and near extinction of that rich social life which was once highly developed through associations of various kind, there remain virtually only individuals and the state. This is to the great harm of the state itself. For, with the structure of social governance lost, and with the taking over of all the burdens which erect associations once bore, the state has been overwhelmed and crushed by almost infinite tasks and duties. As history abundantly proves, it is true that on account of changed conditions, many things which were done by small associations in former times cannot be done save by large associations. Still, the most weighty principle, which cannot be set aside or changed, remains fixed and unshaken in social philosophy. Just as it is gravely wrong to take from individuals what they can accomplish by their own initiative and industry and give it to the community, so also it is an injustice, and at the same time a grave evil and disturbance of right order, to assign to a greater and higher association what lesser and subordinate organizations can do. For every social activity ought of its very nature to furnish help to the members of the body social, and never destroy and absorb them. The supreme authority of the state ought, therefore, to let subordinate groups handle matters of and concerns of lesser importance, which would otherwise dissipate its efforts greatly. Thereby, the state will more freely, powerfully, and effectively do all those things that belong to it alone, because it alone can do them, directing, watching, urging, restraining, as occasion requires and necessity demands. Therefore, those in power should be sure that the more perfectly a graduated order is kept among the various associations, in observance of the principle of subsidiarity function, the stronger social authority and effectiveness will be the happier and more prosperous the condition of the state. First and foremost, the state and every good citizen ought to look to and strive toward this end, that the conflict between the hostile classes be abolished, and harmonious cooperation of the industries and professions be encouraged and promoted. The social policy of the state, therefore, must devote itself to the reestablishment of the industries and professions. In actual fact, human society now, for the reason that it is founded on classes with divergent aims, and hence opposed to one another, and therefore inclined to enmity and strife, continues to be in a violent condition and is unstable and uncertain. Labor, as our predecessor explained well in his encyclical, is not a mere commodity. On the contrary, the worker's human dignity in it must be recognized. It, therefore, cannot be bought and sold like a commodity. Nevertheless, as the situation now stands, hiring and offering for hire in the so-called labor market separates men into two divisions, as into battle lines, and the contest between these divisions turns the labor market itself almost into a battlefield, where face to face the opposing lines struggle bitterly. Everyone understands that this grave evil, which is plunging all human society to destruction, must be remedied as soon as possible. But complete cure will not come until this opposition has been abolished, and well-ordered members of the social body, industries, and professions are constituted, in which men may have their place, not according to the position each has in the labor market, but according to the respective social functions which each performs. For under nature's guidance it comes to pass that just as those who are joined together by nearness of habitation establish towns, so those who follow the same industry or profession, whether in the economic or other field, form guilds or associations, so that many are wont to consider these self-governing organizations, if not essential, at least natural to civil society. Because order, as St. Thomas well explains, is unity arising from the harmonious arrangement of many objects, A true, genuine social order demands that the various members of a society be united together by some strong bond. This unifying force is present not only in the producing of goods or the rendering of services, in which the employers and employees of an identical industry or profession collaborate jointly, but also in that common good to achieve which all industries and professions together ought, each to the best of its ability, to cooperate amicably. And this unity will be the stronger and more effective, the more faithfully individuals in the industries and professions themselves strive to do their work and excel in it. It is easily deduced from what has been said that the interests common to the whole industry or profession should hold first place in these guilds. The most important among these interests is to promote the cooperation in the highest degree of each industry and profession for the sake of the common good of the country. Concerning matters, however, in which particular points, involving advantage or detriment to employers or workers, may require special care and protection, the two parties, when these cases arise, can deliberate separately, or as the situation requires, reach a decision separately. The teaching of Leo XIII on the form of political government, namely, that men are free to choose whatever form they please, provided that proper regard is had for the requirements of justice and of the common good, is equally applicable in due proportion. It is hardly necessary to say to the guilds of the various industries and professions. Moreover, just as the inhabitants of a town are wont to found associations with the widest diversity of purposes, which each is quite free to join or not, so those engaged in the same industry or profession will combine with one another into associations equally free for purposes connected in some manner with the pursuit of the calling itself. Since these free associations are clearly and lucidly explained by our predecessor of illustrious memory, we consider it enough to emphasize this one point. People are quite free not only to found such associations, which are a matter of private order and private right, but also in respect to them freely to adopt the organization and the rules which they judge most appropriate to achieve their purpose. The same freedom must be asserted for founding associations that go beyond the boundaries of individual callings. And may these free organizations, now flourishing and rejoicing in their salutary fruits, set before themselves the task of preparing the way, in conformity with the mind of Christian social teaching, for those larger and more important guilds, industries, and professions which we mentioned before, and make every possible effort to bring them to realization. Attention must be given also to another matter that is closely connected with the foregoing. Just as the unity of human society cannot be founded on an opposition of classes, so also the right ordering of economic life cannot be left to a free competition of forces. For from this source, as from a poisoned spring, have originated and spread all the errors of individualist economic teaching, destroying through forgetfulness or ignorance the social and moral character of economic life. It held that economic life must be considered and treated as altogether free from and independent of public authority, because in the market, i.e., in the free struggle of competitors, it would have a principle of self-direction which governs it much more perfectly than would the intervention of a created intellect. But free competition, while justified and certainly useful, provided it is kept within certain limits, clearly cannot direct economic life, a truth which the outcome of the application and practice of the tenets of this evil individualistic spirit has more than sufficiently demonstrated. Therefore, it is most necessary that economic life be again subjected to and governed by a true and effective directing principle. This function is one that the economic dictatorship which has recently displaced free competition can still less perform, since it is a headstrong power and a violent energy that, to benefit people, needs to be strongly curbed and wisely ruled. But it cannot curb and rule itself. Loftier and noble principles, social justice and social charity, must therefore be sought, whereby this dictatorship may be governed firmly and fully. Hence, the institutions themselves of peoples, and particularly those of all social life, ought to be penetrated with this justice, and it is most necessary that it be truly effective, that is, to establish a juridical and social order which will, as it were, give form and shape to all economic life. Social charity, moreover, ought to be, as the soul of this order, an order which public authority ought to be ever ready effectively to protect and defend. It may be able to do this the more easily as it rids itself of the burdens which, as we have stated above, are not properly its own. Furthermore, since the various nations largely depend on one another in economic matters and need one another's help, they should strive with a united purpose and effort to promote by wisely conceived pacts and institutions a prosperous and happy international cooperation in economic life.